Look, I've said this before. A lot of people out there do not know how politics and our political systems here in the UK actually work. Many base them, of course, on the fact of what they observe going on in Westminster. But even then, there are procedures, rules, paperwork that they don't see, which when they encounter it, get incredibly confused, just as Lee Anderson did and Reform when they tried to introduce a bill to try and stop the government from using quantitative easing. It's all a bit embarrassing, quite frankly. And then you go down to the local level, and oh boy, have we seen some prime examples of Reform UK basically being purely incompetent. Because you would think that if you were going to stand to be a councillor, that at least, first of all, you would have policy about, what you were going to do in these local areas. Maybe you would actually, I don't know, read up and look at the rules and regulations about how to be a councillor and, what it involves and what you have to do, and maybe the number of meetings you have to do to be involved with with being a councillor. Because for a party who ran on and specifically ran on the fact that they will hit the ground running, they haven't. They've hit the ground face first in the most embarrassing ways we have been covering. Just yesterday, we covered the fact that they're not going to put sprinklers in schools because, I need to get all the facts first to make sure. Meanwhile, of course, as we covered, if they had sprinklers in a school, in a fire that took place back in 2020, it would have been way cheaper than the cost of having to rebuild all the school. And yet, can't make any promises. Can't make any promises. I just need all the facts. Anyway, today we're going down to Cornwall Council because, as you may remember, here was, of course, an area where Reform UK did, significantly well. In some cases, of course, this was a place where one guy won on 19% of the vote. Again, very democratic, because they did win seats, but not enough to form a majority. And instead, what happened was the Lib Dems and the Independents got together and went, we ain't having that mess. So they coalitioned together to have the required seats to essentially run Cornwall Council. And they are entirely allowed to do that. That is how the council system in their, district works. And of course, Reform UK being incredibly salty, not only just there, but in Doncaster, as we also covered recently as well. But they're being even more salty now that they are being excluded from this. And again, this is how democracy in our local councils works. They did not win enough seats. They do not get to dictate what they want because they are not the ones in control, which says to me, if they were the ones in control, which again, we have seen what happens when they are in control in other councils, especially in places like Durham. No one gets to be on the scrutiny committee unless it's us, and we get to mark our own homework effectively. And for any other committee, forget it. There's no other committee necessary. So yeah, let's go on to this because this seems to be escalating into quite a interesting yet hilarious situation down in Cornwall because they're being incredibly salty about all this. So before we get on into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there's the Patreon page, there's the Buy Me Coffee link where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course the YouTube membership button down below as well. That helps support the channel. And like I say, you can click on the like and share button. That helps support the channel as well. So let's crack on then into this. Coming from Cornwall Live, saying, Reform UK say democracy is not happening at Cornwall Council. Anyway, this is where it gets, oh boy, does this get fun. So strap yourselves in. A war of words has broken out at Lys Kernow County Hall in Truro, with Reform UK's group leader saying that democracy is not in place at Cornwall Council. Councillor Rob Parsonage argues that his Reform UK councillors should hold more senior committee roles, as it's the largest opposition party, in order to scrutinise the councils running the Lib Dems independent administration. Again, not how it works, because it's up to the Lib Dems and independents, because they are the ones in charge. They have a coalition to be the largest party there. They get to basically decide who gets to sit on what in what situations. However, it gets kind of even more funny when the Lib Dems come back at it. So, however, the council's Liberal Democrat leader, Cllr Leigh Frost, now believes that Reform's 28 councillors, 26 of course, who were now newly elected on the 1st of May, do not have enough experience to chair the committees they want to head up, he said. We've tried to work with all groups to make sure that the people with all the right skills and experience and talent get the right roles. Not like before, when all the administration members got all the seats, as that's just ridiculous. So, okay, pairing people up, making sure that they're, getting the right people with the right skills and talent to run these committees, not people who have no idea how to chair or run committees. Because if you do appoint someone who has no idea how to run a committee, that is a massive waste of time, potentially, that this guy's not going to know how to run a committee, go do all sorts of kind of rule breaking things that are just going to end up wasting even more council time. And again, maybe these people, if they were going to be elected, maybe they should have learnt that. Maybe they should have, looked into that more. Anyway, the Borden councillor also, I want to add that Reform, of course, talked a lot about the financial situation at Cornwall Council. That is one of their main things that they campaigned on. So my group support them if they want to put up a chair and vice chair for those committees. They would then have someone in a position of power to look at the finances of the council. Rob Parsonage said he would think about it, and he has not talked about it with me ever since. Really? So this, as I said, gets fun. Reform UK going out, going, democracy's not happening at Cornwall Council. We're not getting any committee seats at all. Meanwhile, of course, the Lib Dem leader comes forward and said, no, we've talked about it. They want to be in power, relook at the finances. So put forward a person, deputy chair for these committees. Not talked with me about it ever since. But remember, guys, democracy is not happening at Cornwall Council. Anyway, so it continues. It may, of course, be a misunderstanding, but I thought they were going to come back to me and decide whether they would actually be happy with that. Councillor Partridge says his understanding was that Councillor Frost would come back to him after talking it through with his deputy councillor Adam Palmer. The administration has offered Reform the chair of the Budget Development Overview and Scrutiny Committee and vice chair positions on the Audit and Corporate Financial Overview and Scrutiny Committees. Really? Remember, guys, democracy is not happening, but they've offered them the chair and vice chair positions on on something they actually campaigned on. The incompetence here is staggering from Reform, as always. It is. Anyway, Reform then, who went and voted on now on Cornwall Council with the most councillors of any political group, but of course not enough to form a majority now to lead, feel that they should have more now senior roles, particularly now on scrutiny committees. Several attempts by Reform councillors now to stand for chair and vice chair of the roles have been outvoted in favour of members now of other political groups. Again, remember, guys, democracy is not happening, but there's voting now taking place. Again, This is how these councils work in this case in Cornwall Council. But again, because they're not winning, they're not being put in these roles, they're being, ignored, voted out, because I'll guarantee you now, all these other groups look at them and think, no, that guy's an idiot. He's got no idea what he's doing. Why on earth should we put him in that position? Anyway, Reform, of course, did put forward Councillor Kevin Talwyn, now as the chair of the Constitutional Governance Committee on Tuesday. The new councillor who now defected from the Tories to Reform, of course, didn't get the role, as Maywon Kerrown's Dick Cole received far more votes. The Conservative member, John Rose, was, of course, elected vice chair. Councillor Frost says that Cllr and Rose were voted in now as the most experienced councillors now for these roles. Of the committees that have now sat so far, none have had Reform councillors elected, now chair or vice chair roles, despite, of course, two Reform councillors, Roger Talwyn and Peter Charon, being proposed now for chair and vice chair on the Council Strategic Planning Committee just last week. Liberal Democrats Chris Bates was voted in as the chair, with the independent councillor James Ball elected now as vice chair. Again, because they have come together, because they have coalitioned, they have the votes on the council. And not too surprisingly, other parties are not working with Reform on this. And we know why, because A, they have shown a staggering amount of incompetence, having no knowledge about how their local council works, what they would do when they get in these positions. All they are doing is that they are crying because they are salty, because they are not being elected to positions which they are, again, claiming they would have, be fantastic and wonderful at. And then when they go, okay, here's the budget scrutiny committee, who are you going to elect for it? Didn't even put forward a member. Anyway, Councillor Robin Moorcroft, another independent, was now chair of the licensing committee, with Councillor Damon Dennis, Lib Dem, now as vice chair, while Luke Rogers, the Lib Dem, of course, became the chair of the Harbours Board. Nevin Averley, the Conservatives, was elected its vice chair. The East Sub-Area Planning Committee chair, Andrew Parsons, Lib Dem, was its chair. Councillor Mark Gibbons, independent, now as its deputy. Councillor Frost argued that many of the Reform councillors proposed now for senior committee roles don't even have the experience now to warrant their positions. I couldn't agree more. Chairing a meeting isn't just chairing a meeting. There is lots of background stuff that you need. Some serious experience now for that. We've said that we'll support them now for vice chairs on the committees that they want, for audit and corporate finance overview and scrutiny. And once they've got now a few years under their belt as vice chair, we'll support them for the chair. Nothing is, of course, guaranteed, because committees now vote for their own chairs and vice chairs. Unlike the previous administration, no group has a majority on committees anymore. So it really doesn't mean that now that we have all to work together. And we've now ensured that Reform have got the support in these areas where they want support. We've even supported their candidates. But they've said, I want this. And then the thing is, you're trying to now negotiate between several groups. The I want is, of course, very difficult. We are supporting Labour's Laurie McGowan for chair of audit, as he was the vice chair of the last administration, and he's really good at it when it comes to finance. It is not a party political thing at all. It's about making sure the right people now are in the right roles. Again, couldn't agree more when they're in this situation, because it really does seem, as we've talked about this before, when this first stuff in Cornwall started kicking off, that Reform wanted to be in control, have complete control, basically make sure they make all the rules. But he have the independents and the Lib Dems coming together going, okay, we're going to try and make sure everyone, can do this. We're going to make sure that people are put in different positions. You've got Labour's vice chair for the audit committee now becoming its chair. Why? Because he's good at what he does. The leader went on to add, I've only seen one of Reform's opinion pieces saying that they've now got no representation because we keep keeping them out of the scrutiny. They've got about 4 places on every scrutiny committee. We've really tried to help them. This is honestly, this is making reform sound absolutely pathetic and so petty. Like, we've really tried to help them, guys. Try and like understand what's going on. We've been there to try and help them, but every single step of the way, they've just denied what's going on because they can't understand. They just have no idea what they're doing. Anyway, it continues. They obviously need to decide whether they actually want to be part of Cornwall Council or just now on the outside throwing stones. If they want to get stuff done, then they need to be part of it. Responding now to Councillor Frost's comments about the lack of experience, Reform's group leader said of his Cornwall Council colleagues that Reform UK has somebody who was chief executive officer of a hospital. 2 people who have run a very successful business, including care homes and IT. Another person who has been on the executive of a number of nuclear sites and organizational restructures around focused on safety delivery. These CVs, I would suggest, probably eclipse a number of people's CVs on the council hall today. Just because you have someone who ran a very successful hospital does not mean that they have a single clue about what goes on being a councillor. If you were to take the most experienced CEO and drop him into the head of a council, they'd have probably no clue what they were doing because they probably need to learn about all this stuff about how it runs, what happens on this. They've just got absolutely no clue on this. Anyway, Councillor Parsonage then also added, they originally offered us now 2 of the vice chair roles now for audit, corporate, and finance. We didn't ask them. For. Wait. So they actually offered you these 2 roles. You did not ask for them, and then you did not go back to it. But remember, guys, democracy just not happening at this council. Jesus. Anyway, he continued saying, we were, of course, focusing on audit and scrutiny committees because they're the ones which, as opposition, we should be sitting on now as chair and setting the agenda, etc. If we were running the council, we would not be putting forward people to be chairs of any of the scrutiny committees or audit committee because that is the job of the opposition. Oh, I'm bear in mind of what has happened in places like Durham and Kent, where they have like full control. Yeah, they haven't put these people in charge of the scrutiny committees. They have not done that at all. So saying that when that is going on in other councils, classic. So Leigh Frost, of course, later said that Reform could have the chair of the Budget Overview and Scrutiny Committee as well as those 2 vice chairs. I said that we were actually looking at the scrutiny committees. He said he needed to go back to his deputy Annual Parliament and discuss it further. I haven't heard anything else from him specifically about what was going on, and I'm not going chasing. Wait, you. Oh, what a moron! What a moron! I'm sorry. What a fool! Yeah. I'm not gonna chase them for it. But remember, guys, democracy is not happening. If democracy is not happening at Cornwall Council, it is because Reform UK have no clue about what on earth is going on or how they are actually involved in this entire thing. I can guarantee you now, we are going to see some really funny stuff coming from Cornwall Council from these Reform idiots down there for the next couple of years. It is going to be hilarious, but it's going to be pretty much along the lines of democracy isn't happening. We have been denied democracy. Anyway, He continued, "We are, of course, the opposition. We have 28 seats and we will act as the opposition. And I've told them and hold them to account. Whatever they are doing, something good, we will help them try to accelerate whatever it is." He added that, of course, talks behind the scenes to try and choose prospective chairs and vice chairs before the actual committee's vote on who is going to be in the senior roles shows a lack of democracy at the heart of the council. But you he's just admitted that yes, he is having those types of discussions at Cornwall Council. And not only that, but you've also seen the leader, Councillor Frost, there talk about how they are talking with other parties about who chairs. People have been elected chair and vice chair. Guess what? From different parties, different groups. This all feeds back to what I've talked about, something larger. That when you look at people who talk about like local councils, but have no clue about how they are run or how they work or like the inner workings, you tend to see this. Like, oh, there's no democracy going on there. You know, the councillors are all, you know, corrupt as the day is long. Councillor so and so's on the take, all this stuff. And now that they're actually in charge, they're in, well, not even in charge, but they are actually elected and they're in there. They're saying the exact same things. Oh, there's no democracy on this council. What have we just been reading? What is the stuff he's just admitted to? And yet these guys wanted to run Cornwall Council. I'll tell you now, Cornwall, you've dodged a bullet. You got lucky and you dodged a bullet. Oh boy. If you live in Cornwall, you are lucky. You are so lucky that the Lib Dems and the Independents did well. You are so lucky on that one. Anyway, it continues. You continue to say you now have the administration, the Liberal Democrats, and you have the alternative Liberal Democrats, the Independents. Wait, what? You've basically got a group of 42 Liberal Democrats agreeing people who are now chairs and vice chairs prior to having a meeting that purports to show democracy at work by people voting in the chair and vice chair when it has already now been prearranged. What? They've just said you could be part of those discussions. And I love the fact, once again, they're calling independent councillors just, oh yeah, they're just the alternative Liberal Democrats. They're just they're just the alt Lib Dems. What? Again, no idea how local politics indeed works. That is insane. That is generally insane. So to the general public, they are now seeing democracy at work. Well, they are seeing democracy at work, but you're just refusing to take part in it for some childish, salty reason. However, in the background, these people have now been put into these positions because they are now tied to the administration very firmly by the deflection of Councillor Frost telling you that he has offered us now 3 positions. He has demonstrated that democracy is not in place. Wait. Did that? So what? He shouldn't have offered you those positions? You know, we've just seen that they've put other people in from other parties in positions. What is going on? Oh my god. We've seen some incompetence from these reform councillors, but this is the most incompetent one. This is the most incompetent one that's on here. Councillor Parsonage said that he's now only, of course, being open and transparent about what is going on in Cornwall Council, as well as we will now implement change. I've requested CVs of members now of the Miscellaneous Licensing Committee to allow Reform UK to vote for the best person to be chair and vice chair of the committee. To date, we have not received any response from any of the committee other than Councillor Ducey Tudor. Don't even think they have to send you their CV. Not a requirement. Um, wow. Wow. That's all I'm going to say. Wow. That is, and that's the guy, Councillor Rob Parsonage. I honestly have not, we've seen some incompetence happen so far with these reform people, but this has to be the most incompetent one so far. What are the comments like on this? Someone said, "Does anyone know what reform policies actually are for Cornwall and what they will stand for, apart from just being against everything?" Genuine question. Yeah, here it is. How can reform say that democracy is, of course, not happening at County Hall when all the chairs and vice chairs have to be elected by other councillors? That is surely the very definition of democracy. Chairing a committee is not an easy role. Getting across all the details and reports, of course, takes time. Councillors probably feel it would be better to try and have a more experienced councillors in these roles, particularly at this time when they are now trying to undo all the mess left by the Tories. Reform would now be better off waiting till next year when their councillors have now actually settled in, learned the ropes, and now pushed for chair and vice chair roles, rather than now throwing their toys out of the pram every time something doesn't go their way. And when they do try and work with their, why don't, of course, they try and work with their fellow councillors? I forgot, of course, this is reform. They're not actually interested in working with anyone and would rather, of course, push their own agenda. Yeah, someone said, "Oh, well, it's going so well in Kent where reform have overall control. Oh, my mistake is an absolute shambles." um, yeah, so it does look like a lot of people are calling them out on this, which is good. It's good to see. Honestly, that's very good to see, at least. So, yeah, wow. Is that easily the most incompetence we've ever seen from reform so far? Remember, we're only at this point, what, 6, 7 weeks in? Oh, it's gonna be, there's gonna be so much more to come, isn't there? So much more to come. So, as always, leave your comments down below, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.